Welcome, everyone. Today we are talking about the state of talent management, and I am thrilled to have with me today for this conversation Marc Effron, president of the Talent Strategy Group. Welcome, Marc. So glad to have you today.
Super happy to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
All right. So I'm fascinated myself. I'd love to hear, before we kind of get into our topic, tell us a little bit about how you got into what you're doing today.
Accidentally, and I will expound on that. I did not have a purposeful career in either consulting or in HR. I started off life coming out of college with a political science degree, worked for a congressman for a couple of years, fell into political consulting. So I'll tell a short story, but it ties to what I'm doing today. So I fell in with a group in Southern California who did political consulting for land developers. And here's why it's relevant. What they had done is they had figured out that to win in local offices, meaning water board, school board, sewer board. Now you may ask, tangent here, why would you care about winning water board, school board, sewer board? Well, because if you were developing land in the middle of nowhere, think Palmdale, California in 1987, well, you needed the votes of the water board and the school board and the sewer board in order to get your project approved. And so you wanted to have people who were friendly to development on those boards. So they figured out, this consulting firm I worked with, the most simple way to get people elected to those offices. They figured out, well, you need to print up the right types of signs. You needed to walk door to door, read a particular script and something else. So they had radically simplified the election winning process to a few things that mattered. Okay, one thing in Marc's mind, simplify things to a few things that matter. So worked for a congressman for a couple of years, or a congressman, then worked for this consulting firm, was in politics for a few years. And after that, I felt dirty and wanted to do something else. Went off to business school, had no experience with big companies at all. And so I got to business school and they said, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know. I had read this book that was popular at the time called In Search of Excellence. And I said, oh, I want to do what they do in that book. They're like, well, it's kind of like HR work. I was like, what's HR? They said, well, you should take classes like, organizational development. And I said, okay. And it turned out those are the only classes that I actually did well in business school. Accounting kicked my butt, econ kicked my butt, all the quant classes kicked my butt. But for some reason, like the OB, the OD, the consulting classes, it's just like, oh, well, this goes here and that goes there and you do this. So for the next 15, 20 years, I moved back and forth between consulting roles and corporate roles in HR. But I never really thought about it as HR. It just was kind of fun. You look at people and structure and you try to optimize it. And then I ended up, I was at Avon Hewitt, leading their leadership consulting practice. And kind of all these thoughts came together that we can do this so much simpler and easier. And I went to my boss at the time and I said, hey, got this epiphany. We can do it simpler and easier. And he said, I'm not going to do it simpler and easier. You just talked about reducing our fees by 75%. But no. And I'm like, fine, I'll go somewhere else. And so I went to Avon Products, at the time, very big cosmetics company, and they wanted to do things in a simpler and easier way. And so I had this wonderful greenfield site, a very supportive CHRO, Lucian Alzieri, brilliant guy, very supportive CEO, Andrea Jung. And I had this greenfield site where me and my team could actually practice all of these simpler, easier things. Middle of that scenario, somebody asked me to speak at a conference about all the changes that we were making. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. They're like, well, what's the title of your speech? Oh, I don't know, like a one-page talent management. It's like, okay. Given the speech afterwards, it happened that there was an editor from Harvard Business Publishing in the audience. And she was like, hey, pretty good speech. Have you ever thought about writing a book on that? And I said, well, no, I'd be pretty stupid to write a book about one-page talent management, wouldn't I? I said, I've got 3 much better book ideas I'll pitch you on. I'm like, here's idea 1, idea 2, and idea 3. She's like, those are all pretty terrible ideas. And I was like, let's talk about that old one-page talent idea you pitched me on. And literally that was kind of the kick into consulting was it was a bit of a put up or shut up moment. It's like, okay, Marc, you think you got a better way of doing this stuff? You can get a book behind you. Let's see if it works. And so that launched Talent Strategy Group. And for the past almost 15 years now, we've had the good fortune of working with the world's premier organizations to help them radically simplify HR. And back to I'll end the story in 10 seconds. Back to that initial political consulting environment, what I really learned was, yeah, if you reduce a few things to the essence, what really matters. In political consulting, it was you print signs the right way, you knock on the doors and have a simple script. It was something else at the time. The same thing applies in our field. A few big things matter. That stuck with me to this very day. End of story.
Nice. Well, and I'm really thrilled to hear the story, because I think having both I think it's important for consultants to have spent some time inside organizations as well. I just think it helps you see how these things come to life, what works, what doesn't, and really better understand the business rhythms.
Well, yeah, I think especially around things that aren't evident unless you've been inside, that we all know hamstring talent practices: accountability, transparency, organizational politics, all the stuff that eviscerate a well-designed process if you don't understand them. And you and I have probably both seen consultants who don't have practical experience come in with the 30-page deck. Oh, it works like this. And you're like, oh, no, it doesn't. That's lovely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. But no, it doesn't. Because, yeah, unless you've been inside, you don't understand, okay, Bob's not going to like that because Bob actually designed the predecessor process and he's going to dig his heels in when you come in with that. I mean, just the basics, unless you've sat there, you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you being on today. I first came in contact with you through Talent Quarterly. At least two of the talent teams that I have worked on, basically treated that as, our own little book club, right? So that would come out, we would, read either some targeted things based on what we were working on or the whole thing and sort of bat around, what are the takeaways that we want to put into practice. And so, so I've been sort of reading what you and your team have been putting out for some time. And so just thrilled to have a talent management celebrity on the on the podcast today.
Well, Talent Quarterly, I love putting it out for your listeners who aren't familiar with it. It was a magazine where we literally just asked the smartest people in the talent and HR and consulting field, hey, would you write for us? And people were incredibly generous. And our goal was to put out, or my original goal was to put out a magazine that was a bit of a cross between an art magazine and a foreign affairs magazine, kind of a punchy but irreverent but fact-based magazine. And so we tried to keep it graphically cool, but have really interesting articles in there. And we did it for about, I think, 5 or 6 years. And then it literally became just too challenging to do, running a full-time consulting group. And it was a great way to lose money as well. So you combine those two things together and it wasn't sustainable.
Yeah. But you're still putting the writing out, right, through other sort of online, your own writing at least, right? Through
we do our own. It just it's gathering other authors together. Unfortunately, we might revive it in the future.
Yeah. Well, we're still benefiting from the writing, whether or not our fun, cool physical copy of the Talent Quarterly is arriving at our doorsteps. So we wanted to talk about sort of the future of talent management today. There is so much happening, for the listener, because I think this is going to come out in September. So it's late June. We're on the doorstep of July. It's been a wild year, wild time to be alive, 2025. A lot happening, right? So there's tons of sort of whiplash coming out of Washington when it comes to tariff policies and things like that, right? So we're seeing clients sort of be running in one direction, then needing to pivot and run, in another direction with all of their own operations, let alone, I think we've seen a fair number of layoffs in the last, quarter. So we have sort of a flooded market of talent. So it's kind of a wild time to be in the talent management space. So I'd love to just generally start with any thoughts or reflections you have on 2025 so far? Where are we at? Where are we going?
Yeah, I think the good news good news in the talent space is that CEOs and boards are more interested in great talent than ever. So they always have been, but the past, I think, 5 years, they have heightened their interest in having more better quality talent, which is great for us. And I think we've seen they put greater pressure on CHROs, they put greater pressure on heads of talent to have more better quality talent in their organizations and to have processes and practices that sustained the flow
Mm-hmm.
of that talent. So, one, the customers are hungry and are demanding. That is a beautiful thing. Um, and it puts good pressure on us. I think that's the demand side. I think the challenge is on the supply side. We've seen a bit of a shift. We've seen, I'm going to call it 10%. I might be off by half there. Um, of the population say, I'm not as interested in signing up for that particular deal anymore. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think we've seen some people say, I could be a high performer based on your definition of it. I don't want to be anymore. And so there has probably been a somewhat a decrease. I don't know how much of a decrease in
Mm-hmm.
the supply of talent who we might have wanted to be top talent. So I think at the macro level, we have a bit of a misfit of demand versus supply, or even of just the mindset of CEOs still want people to show up, work their butts off, behave perfectly. Their team loves them, their colleagues love them, they'll give anything. And the supply, where it's like, yeah, some people still do that, but a lot of people won't. So just the mindset of what it means to be talent. So let's just start kind of writ large. I think there's that challenge, and then we get into fit of skills. Do people even have the right capabilities to match? I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but it used to be there were 3 or 4 million open roles out there, and it wasn't because we just hadn't found the right people. It was because we just don't have the right skills to fill those 3 or 4 million open roles. So part of the challenge is even if layoffs are happening, are the roles that are being laid off, do they fit with the roles that are
Mm-hmm.
out there, or are people even trainable? I mean, everyone loves to scream skills these days. People have to be one, trainable, two, want to be trained to do different things. Those are both big open questions for all those people who are very, very in love with skills being everything going forward. So I think that one big question for talent management is how do we make sure that we can bring enough of the right talent into our organizations as quickly as we can going forward. Third, and then I will take a breath, is can we do a better job of running the machine? I use the machine analogy very purposefully of talent building in our organizations, because what we see every single day with our clients around the globe and through a lot of our research is oftentimes we are really good at ticking the box of saying, oh, yes, we have that practice in place. We have performance management. We have succession planning. We have talent reviews. But then when we look at the output, what we
Mm-hmm.
see is um, you have all of the machinery, but it's not actually producing anything. And the most recent example is to illustrate that we did a survey earlier this year on critical roles,
Mm-hmm.
and the good news was we asked companies, do you select for critical roles, and how do you do it? And we actually had, I think it was like 84% of 200 plus companies said, yes, we actually do select for critical roles. And we asked, how do you do it? And most actually used methodologies that we would consider to be good ways of selecting for critical roles, which means you aren't doing it by hierarchy, you aren't doing it by the incumbent in the role, so you're doing it the right way. Cool. And then we asked, great, do you have a development plan for people in critical roles? And like 40% of people said we do. Okay. Do you hold leaders of people in critical roles accountable for their growth? Like 25%. So when we ask, do you actually operationalize critical roles? No. So yeah, you say you have critical roles, but you don't do anything with them. We can say the same thing with succession plans. You have succession plans. Do you select successors from them? You have performance management. Does everybody have a three big powerful goals? So I think the other challenge for us in talent management right now, when we think about the future of talent management, is
Mm-hmm.
can we not just tick the boxes and say, oh, yep, we have all these things? Can we operationalize them in the way that actually delivers the outputs that people are paying us for?
Mm. I'm trying to decide which thing to dig into first here. I'm gonna take it from the top, right? So I think you were talking about um, folks who are sort of opting out of maybe being high performers, or maybe even putting themselves, raising their hand for leadership, right? Um, so I think in the past, I found in my own consulting in the past, we really had to work with people to kind of pull apart um, advancement drive from leadership drive, right? To say, do you want the role because of the pay and prestige, or do you want the role because you enjoy leading and the work of being a leader? And best case scenario might be both, right? And second best might be you've got the leadership drive, maybe not the stronger advancement drive. Worst case scenario is you have the advancement drive without the leadership drive, right? That's sort of from a potential for flame out, perspective. But I think what you're saying here is, and I've seen this too, is, and I would say the pandemic was probably pretty eye opening for people around essential roles, what is really essential, what's not, what's essential in their lives and what's not, right? How are we finding, and I know there's a lot of interesting writing these days about work-life balance, which we might be a podcast for another day, but how is this fulfilling me as a total person in adding into the equation of my life, right? And so I think I've seen this as well, where people are saying, I think I kind of want to step off the leadership track, right, or this high potential track, and get into a job where I can knock home runs and just show up and do that and maximize my life in other ways, right? And I think I think it's always been hard for HR folks, talent management folks, consultants to make space for people who just want to be an expert and do their thing and show up every day. Like, thinking back even to when I was going through grad school, this idea of like, well, why wouldn't everybody want to develop and want to be promoted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe we're finally getting smacked in the face a little bit more with that.
Well, and I think it challenges companies to think through the multiple deals they need to offer to people at work. And we're already not good at this. And one of the things that we have, this very simple tool that people are amazed by, they shouldn't be, called the talent investment grid, which is literally just a 9-box where we say you need to think through how you want to invest in people in each of these boxes, whether you use a 9-box grid or not. Just use it as an example. Hey, your hypo investment should look different than your high performer investment. That should look different than your average performer investment. So you should have a deal, a conscious deal in each of those boxes. I think the challenge in many organizations right now is they have kind of a hypo deal and then everybody else gets some stuff. Okay, now we need to be conscious about, there's a deal for the person who wants to put in the best 30 hours they can. You need a deal for them. You never even thought about that deal, because actually they do. They're not lazy, but they've got 30 hours and they're going to give you the best 30 hours, like a real best 30 hours. Have you thought what the deal is for them? And I think we need organizations to think more about, you're going to need to kind of split up the deals. You might need to have 10 different deals that you need to think through. But you need to figure that out, because there are, to your point, people who are simply saying, yeah, I'm going to work my butt off for this period of time. You're going to get the absolute best of me, but it's going to end at that point.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this might come to the core of what you were talking about earlier too, which is I've been in organizations who have leveraged a very similar 9-box to try to drive the sort of the next step for leaders, right? Not just to identify who's high potential, but to say, if someone's in this box, what does that mean? What kind of time, attention, investment, should they be getting based on where they're at? And I think this is sort of what you were saying at the beginning, which is where the rubber hits the road on, are we actually operationalizing that, right? That is much harder to scale, right? So I can point to some phenomenal individual leaders who really take how they're managing people as an individual thing, right? An individualized thing. It's kind of at the heart of the term equity, but uh, the like everybody gets what they need kind of an approach. But scaling that's really tough, right? I think so. Maybe I'll throw this question back to you: is how do we continue to scale that, right? Because if it was just a factor of tools and processes or knowing what to do, right, we'd already be there.
Well, you have to categorize. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to say, hey, people are to show up in buckets. And you have to draw a line somewhere. And they're the easy buckets. They're the high pos. That's an easy bucket. There's the good, solid average. That's an easy bucket. There's the lower folks. That's an easy bucket. It's that group that's above average and below hypo. It used to be you could almost say they're high performers. Okay, that's a bucket. That's probably the bucket you need to slice into a few different categories now, because they're the clear high performers, which is, hey, let's take, I always use international tax because it's it's a very precise thing. You're probably not going to become CFO out of that job, but wow, if you're international tax, you're sharp. We want you to be good at your job. We want you happy. Cool. But maybe now it's the international tax person who used to work 50 hours who only wants to work 30 hours now. You're still really good, but I'm going to invest in you a little bit differently. So we probably need to think about that high performer category in a few different tranches of investment. But it does mean literally thinking through, what does the investment look like? Because if you're my boss, Kent, you need to come to me and say, Mark, I've got a great deal for you. Here's the deal we offer at ABC Company for people who want to contribute like you do. And I used to think the lever was, because I get upset when people want more than they have earned. I used to think the lever was, if you don't want to work that many hours or contribute that much, you're not going to get all the goodies. But now people are like, I don't want the goodies. It's like, okay, well, that actually makes the conversation easier. Because you can say, look, here's the deal. They're like, yeah, cool, that's a good deal. But we need to define the deal.
Yeah. Well, for the sake of time, I want to move into the other topic. So you mentioned skills, right? I think with sort of where we're at with a lot of talent kind of on the market, so to speak, and our need to be thinking about, and I like how you put it. So both, like, what are the skills that are needed? Because there might not be obvious choices right now in terms of people who have done that role. So how do we pick people who have the transferable skill? But I like how you were sort of also referencing, but do they want to be, are they trainable? Do they want to be trained in a new way aimed at something new, right? And so I know skills-based orgs has been a real catchphrase, so to speak, that I've seen multiple organizations that I've been in HR, try to be moving toward. It's not without its challenges either. So I'd love to just hear some of your thoughts on those who are moving in that direction and making some level of progress, with it.
Yeah, I wrote an article last year called "Is the Juice Worth the Squeeze?" About skills, and it really was just, I think I wrote 18 questions. It was me simply saying, I don't quite understand the hype around skills. Because obviously we need skills just like we need capabilities and we need behaviors. But the shouting from consultants and tech firms that this is the only way our companies are going to survive is by fundamentally reorienting them with skills as the pivot point. Volume get louder around that. It just seemed a little odd. And it also caused me to ask myself the question, what have you L&D people been doing the past 20 years if we need to urgently do this right now? It's like, what have I been paying you to do? This must happen immediately. It's like, I assume you've been doing something to grow capabilities that didn't work. So that was one question, but it feels like, well, yeah, we all certainly need to increase capabilities, but a lot of the promises that I think are at the top of the hype cycle around skills,
Hmm.
are just that. They are wonderful hopes that somehow we can call out these small latent skills that people have and match them with needs in the organization or other organizations, or that
Hmm.
now the gig economy will somehow, if that was true, it would have already happened.
Hmm.
So I think there are plenty of ways that people can use latent skills already through Fiverr, through lots of other. So if I wanted to apply my graphic design skills, I'm actually pretty good at graphic design. I could go out and apply that somewhere. I haven't because I don't want to. I wouldn't make much money doing that versus my daily rate, which is extremely high for being a consultant. Most people, so long way around, most people like their day job and they want to keep doing their day job. And
Hmm.
so if I lose my day job, I probably don't have a real interest in doing something else until I absolutely have to. Day jobs are sticky for a reason. I'm good at it. I like doing it. My self worth is probably wrapped up in it. And so, assuming that somehow I'm going to take the skills I have, abandon them, and learn to do something else, I think that's a real stretch. And assuming that I am going to be trained to be better at those skills than somebody else who was already doing those skills. So I'm somehow going to
Hmm.
compete, is, I think, a challenge as well. So I think, one, I want as many people to move into new jobs as possible, but I think we need to be realistic. If Susie was already a brilliant graphic designer, Mark loses his consulting role, decides to go into graphic design, he's not going to be competing against Susie very well because Susie's been doing it for 10 years and Mark is
Hmm.
still stepping up that scale. So I think we've got fundamental questions like that
Yeah.
about skilling and reskilling. It sounds lovely, but practically, it's going to be very difficult to apply.
Yeah, I wonder if, yeah, really well put. What you're making me think about is I wonder if the desire to apply it at an enterprise level is where it's maybe causing swirl and getting stuck versus more strategic, more surgically, right? Um, I'm going to use a poor example in the summer of 2025, but I remember hearing about air traffic controllers. They're saying, hey, we need more. Now, this is before the current situation, which anybody who's traveling, you understand the pain these days. Um, but there was this conversation that was happening around we need more air traffic controllers. Where do we find the talent? Right, because there's just not the typical people applying. And the conversation started to look at gamers, people who have a willingness to sit in front of a screen, so they kind of, you start to break it down into, well, what are the skills here, right? Like this
Mhm.
ability to sit in front of a screen, be hyper focused, uh, strategic about, the blocking and tackling in front of you on that. I don't know that they ever got to a place of enacting that from, and I can't remember where I read it. But like that's an example of more of a surgical application to say
Yeah,
we have a need, and how do we think about where to find that skill? Maybe there's a conversation on where to build that skill too, but it almost feels like there's more of a surgical application around both from a job to recruiting and maybe even EVP perspective versus a how do we roll this out at an enterprise level? I think that's
absolutely.
maybe.
Yeah, can it solve some problems? Absolutely, absolutely. And does it apply? Can it add some benefits around the edges? So a lot of the companies that I see using this are companies who have a bit more financial largesse. A lot of my pharma clients are using it. They got a lot of extra
Mhm.
money. Great, we can buy we buy talent marketplaces. Does that make movement within the organization easier? Absolutely, cool. Use it. I think it's a beautiful thing. Um, would I use that to move people to my best roles? Nope. Still need a talent review process. There's still some roles that are off limits. So for kind of the
Right.
masses to ensure a more efficient marketplace, I think it's a beautiful thing. Um, am I going to create unusual matches? So people always love to find oh, Susie is a home chef and we needed a corporate chef. And so people love calling those out and writing the cases. No, that's not the use case. We're not going to pay for the talent marketplace doing that stuff. We need massive shifts of skills to make this stuff actually worthwhile.
Yeah, so I think even what you're saying here is there's probably a leveling aspect where this works better than others, right? We're not going to recruit a collegiate mathematician to be the CFO of a company, right? There are certain repetitions and experiences that one needs that build towards that role versus, probably more entry level sort of individual contributor type roles where this makes more sense. So looking at the time, I want to just circle back to critical roles as well, just very quickly. And time is just flying. I am floored, and we're going to have you back again. Because I think critical roles is fascinating as well, because I've been at some places where we've done this, and I think your observation is spot on. And I wonder if part of this is, again, it's in how we operationalize things, the organizational metabolism for processes and whatnot, right? And I think what I've seen is thinking about specific development or successors for critical roles somewhat gets caught in we're already spending so much time identifying high potentials, walking through succession plans for either every role above a certain level or targeted roles that, I think what I've seen firsthand is we've already spent this much time doing these ones. We just don't have time. Let's identify them. And like that, I've seen that being kind of the ending place as well. Not to mention it's challenging to get organizations' heads around management more often than not might not be the critical roles, right? So there's this challenge when you're sitting around talking about critical roles with the leaders at the table being like, how do I kindly, gently explain that it's none of you versus some other high leverage role in the company?
So a short answer is we need to let the free market in our organizations work. If we describe critical roles in the right way and the organization says, I'm sorry, we've just got too many other things going on, great, that's conversation for another day. But if we say, are there a few roles here that clearly add more value than other roles, that the marketplace would panic if they knew we had the wrong person in? Mm-hmm. If there are roles like that, should we know which roles those are and pay a lot of attention to who the incumbents are and ensure that we have a successor for those roles that can step in and perform at least as well? So if we can have those conversations and people say, oh yeah, then it's incumbent on us in HR to take accountability for that. Mm-hmm. So for things like that, I don't say, oh, that's the business's job. No, it's not. It's our job to help the business do a good job with that. And I think in talent management space, we need to be the ones who are project managing that. And we haven't even touched on AI. I can't believe we haven't touched on AI yet. This is where hopefully AI can start playing a role in almost just monitoring and managing. I can get a text that says, hey, for those 3 critical roles, there's no development plan in the system yet. I'm like, okay, I'll tag, and the agent's already followed up with those managers to say where's the development plan. So hopefully, things like that can be made easier to manage through technology.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was going to be my wild card in just a moment too. One thing I would say about, how do you balance high potential identification, succession planning, and the work of identifying critical roles, I might also recommend if you're going down the road and see critical roles as an important part of your talent management strategy, is maybe take a look at how deep you're going in the organization, and you're getting the feedback of, we don't have time or capacity to do this the way we need to or well. Take a look at how deep you're going with high potential. Take a look at how many roles you're identifying successors for. Because what I've seen firsthand is it's a fun process that makes leaders feel good, makes leaders feel like they've really done some great talent work. But often we're probably going too deep in order to truly trust or really get the mileage out of manager assessment of high potential, and maybe identifying successors for too many roles, especially when, now I get it, when we do and don't enact a succession plan, right? I think the succession plan is kind of in a vacuum when we build it, right? So there are times when there's a context around an opening when somebody leaves where who we had planned to be the next successor just isn't going to work right now. But I don't know that we're always having that conversation anyway, to say, like, is there a reason why the person we thought would be next for this role can't be right now, and we have to think differently? Or, I'm getting a little off track here with saying there might be ways to make room for critical talent, critical role work by looking at, how deep are we going in the high potential and succession place? And to borrow from your article on skills-based leaders, is the juice worth the squeeze on how deep and how many roles we're identifying, or not on the critical side, but succession?
I think that's a great scan. Yeah, I mean, at the point where people say, I don't really, as soon as your customer doesn't appear interested, great, draw the line. Because if they don't care, you shouldn't care. I mean, unless there's a really good reason that they should pay attention, great, go where their energy is, because then they're always going to be excited. Let them build the momentum to say, hey, actually, this might be valuable one level lower. Okay, great, I'm with you, I'll help you out. But yeah, I never want to sell people on stuff where they don't have any energy unless they're fundamentally missing something. I think that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah. Well, and so I want to come back to AI, because I know we chatted once about this a little bit too, and I think you've identified a great place where, if we're thinking proactively, right, about how can talent make use of AI, right? I think you've identified a great place. Like, where can we leverage AI to mine the data, flag certain, whether it's anomalies or parts of the process that haven't been completed. But I want to take a big step back and say, or ask the question, because I think again, summer of 2025, every other day you're seeing posts or articles saying, when is AI coming for your job? So let's talk about HR, leadership development, talent management. Where do you see, how do you see AI coming into this sort of these COEs?
I think it can do a lot once it has more correct information. I think to me, the most powerful area is going to be in goal setting, because most organizations are not good at goal setting. We do a ton of work with companies to help them be better at goal setting, but the process in most organizations is not good. I think that once we can put in place into a system, here are all the jobs that we have, here's the structure that we have, here are the goals we're trying to achieve at the top of the organization, and the system can spit out, boom, here are the goals. Good. For your level, for your job, here are the 4 goals that then ladder up perfectly. You'll need to get this done. It kind of like a lot of times comp systems will say, Kent, for your team members, here are the recommended comp. Now, you can change them if you need to, but we've spit out what should happen. That to me would be a huge lift in just helping to elevate performance. Now, I think also there's some obvious things like, can it sort through data and say, our prediction of potential for Marc or for Kent is X or Y? Yes. But that goes to how much incrementally better are those predictions going to be than what we already do in a talent review? So my question for everybody when we talk about additional pieces of information is, how much better validity do you have with this additional piece of information? So great, maybe the system can now synthesize information faster. Great. Is it going to be 1% better or 25% better accuracy that we're going to get out of it? So I think theoretically you could eliminate half of what a lot of talent leaders do through AI going forward, but I think it's going to be at least 5 years before we're at that point. And I think you're still going to have a fundamental question of, am I going to, as an executive, going to trust AI over trusting an individual sitting across from them?
Yeah, and I think also, so really good insights. And I would add to that, a lot of and I think you kind of said this right on the front end, is it kind of is going to end up depending on how clean is your data, how far back does your data go, right? And I knowing some HR, data analysts, That's a big struggle in organizations, right? Because for a number of reasons, right? Modernizing the data, kind of getting off of other paper-based or database systems, moving into various talent systems. How far back does the data go? Reorgs and how that changes, some of the data. So I think I'm going to sum it up and say, especially, talent folks, HR, talent folks in HR, your jobs are probably safe for quite a while, given the current state of data. But I like the ideas that you're throwing out here too, but where can we lead with it, right? Where can it make some of the parts of the job that are maybe more clunky and administrative easier versus where some of the value truly is added, oftentimes in the room with leaders and heads of HR and business leaders. I'm going to give us a violent shove because I am just shocked at how fast time is flying. So I'm going to, we'll have to have you back someday, but I'm going to get into the advice, what I like to call the advice column. So Marc, what is one piece of advice you have for leaders out there?
One piece of advice is be sure that be sure that your team can sustain high performance, and do that in two ways. One, make sure that everybody is clear about the 3 big deliverables they have this year and meet with them at least every 90 days to discuss where they are against it. As simple as that sounds, that is the best way to ensure that you have a high performing team.
I love that. And I find myself talking regularly with people getting confused with what are priorities, goals, and just asking people to step back and say, what are the 2-3 things that essentially your head rolls if they're not done by the end of the year. What is that? So I like that. I think you're right in it's simpler than we think and more powerful than we probably give credit for. So what's one piece of advice you have for those of us who are supporting leaders out there? Could be HR, could be senior leaders.
Increase your influence by building strong relationships. Relationships are the key to getting stuff done. I think a lot of us in HR think that our technical skills are what should count. And I believe that for a long time. Hey, I'm a smart guy. I know my technical stuff. People should trust me because of that. Yes, they will trust you transactionally because of it. They will believe the data you bring to them, and that's a good thing. Will they stake their corporate life on that? No, they will not. They will stake their corporate life on, I've known Marc for 10 years. We've been buddies. We've hung out. We've had dinner. If he says do it, I'm going to do it. That comes from the relationship that you have built, and that happens over time through social interaction with individuals. Build stronger relationships. You will have far more influence.
I'm shocked at the accuracy of that. And to me, it rings of taking your own medicine, right? That's the advice we give to leaders today, right? We're giving leaders this very same advice when it comes to their own cross-functional influence, how they're managing up, across, down. I think that's the beauty and the simplicity of that advice is, those of us who are supporting leaders out there need to take that medicine as well and build those relationships and not just show up as the experts. I think that's fabulous. All right, well, as we're winding down here, so for those people out there who want more Talent Strategy Group or Marc Effron in their lives, how can people find you? What should people be reaching out to you for?
They can get all sorts of insights on our articles and videos and research at talentstrategygroup.com. We share everything for free, so it is all out there. Read all about it there. Sign up for our newsletter so you'll hear from us every Tuesday and Thursday.
I love it. Awesome. Well, Marc, next time we'll maybe schedule a 3-hour long form interview. That way we can truly get to everything. But I just thrilled to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ken. Great to talk.
All right.